way down the pathway that I had traversed multiple times hadn't exactly gone out the way that I had originally intended it to. My mind had been racing at such a heavy rate from the call that I had received from my sergeant earlier. That evening back at the apartment, it was so bad that I could barely keep myself from nearly running into trees and other shrubbery along the way. The photo that had been in the paper that morning was burnt into my mind, and I just couldn't help but think to myself, what the actual fuck was going on? Well, I guess that was a stupid question, given the events that had transpired just a short time ago. The massacred and bloody remains of Rocky, Zuma, and Marshall in the woods. The cave with that tar-looking demon thing, Leon I think was the name of it, trashing the lookout and killing everyone else there except for Chase. Goodway and her band of fucked up cult members planning that whole massacre out to serve that fucking demon, nearly getting me and Chase killed in the process. And lastly, the newspaper with the missing Goodway herself, and that final call that I had gotten from my sergeant before whatever it was that ended that call. And now, with me stupidly going out and investigating, the only thing in my mind was to finally end this for good. I didn't give a shit if I died or not. As long as Chase and the last remaining Paw Patrol members were safe, that's all that mattered. Regardless, despite everything me and Chase had gone through, I still couldn't wrap my mind about everything that happened. I mean, I guess in the long run, it doesn't even matter. Goodway, for whatever reason, was still alive and out there, and judging by that call I received, she hadn't gone very far. This was further evident when I had finally made my way over towards the cave. My eyes widened with a mix of astonishment and fear as I saw the entrance of the cave that had been completely cleared. There wasn't even a shred of evidence that showed that a piece of debris had even blocked the entrance, despite that happening when me and Chase left. There wasn't even a small chunk of rock that was there that could have even remotely validated the events that had happened such a long while back. I simply stood at the entrance of the cave, my mouth agape, and my mind blank on what the fuck to even do. That's when I remembered the pup pad that Tracker had given to me. I quickly pulled it out and was just about to call the other pups when something in my mind stopped me from hitting the call button. This wasn't a good idea. As much as some extra help would have definitely been nice, especially in this situation, I couldn't risk it. I couldn't risk Goodway, Leon, or whoever the fuck killing any more of them. Especially not Chase. Given how injured he was from that dagger being plunged deep into him. I couldn't do it. I mean, even if he had attempted to try and help me, he was still at a very severe risk of getting killed, and I could not let that happen. So I immediately exited away from the app. I turned off the pup pad and I threw it hard onto the ground, smashing it with my foot repeatedly until it was nothing but a pile of scrap metal. The last thing that I needed was for them to try and track me down and get into whatever shit was going to happen. This was between me and Goodway. Or better yet, that fucker Leon. Whoever it was that I had to face, I was gonna make sure of it that they got every ounce of pain that they could get for putting me, Chase, and everybody else through that shit. Taking in one deep breath of fresh air, I slowly walked into the cave's entrance. Almost as soon as I had stepped inside, I was met with the scent of iron in the air, mixed with the gnarly scent of rotting meat. My conscience had immediately started setting off alarm bells in my head, telling me that I needed to get the fuck out of there and quick, but I ignored it. I wasn't going to go back. Not until I did what I had to do. As I kept on walking, the scent of iron grew more in intensity. It made the air a lot harder to breathe as I kept walking, so much so that I had to rip my shirt in pieces and try and use it as a mask to filter out much of the scent, as much of it as I could. Not like it really did much. Along with the combined smells, I also stepped into something squishy and wet. The sound alone was gag-inducing on its own, but despite all of that, I continued to traverse deeper into the cave. As I made my way down the pathway, my foot stepped on something and I found myself tripping over it and falling face first into a squishy, meaty-sounding floorway. Whatever it was that I had stepped in had pied itself into my face, filling my mouth with a meaty, salty-tasting mixture that had the slight taste of iron and sweet pork, and burning my eyes with whatever liquid had came out of it. After gagging and dry heaving to get the foul mixture out of my mouth, I reached down to my belt and grabbed my flashlight. I would have used it at the very entrance of the cave, but I didn't want to alert anyone to my presence. Although I guess that was rather counterintuitive given how the sounds of squishing and splashing that I had made going down this damn place would have given me away anyway. I had to bang the thing a few times on the palm of my hand to get it to turn on, and when it did, I shined it on what I had slipped on. I was instantly greeted with the severed head of someone. I recoiled back at that sight before, again, flashing the light beam at the thing again to get a better look at it. The head itself looked like it had been crushed under something, given how chunks of brain matter and skull fragments poured out of the top of the head like a glass of spilled milk. The rest of the face hadn't exactly been kept in the best condition, because the rest of it looked like it had been mostly caved in. The eyes were popped out of their sockets and held only by the optical nerve, and the jaw had been ripped open plenty enough to expose the muscle and the entirety of the front and back teeth with such great detail that I could count every last one of them. At least as many of them that were still in their head. I didn't know who it was at first until I noticed something. A tattoo. Specifically, one of a teardrop. The same kind of tattoo that my sergeant had on his face. Son of a fucking bitch, it was him. It was my sergeant. It was him. I shined the light around me and was met with the source of the scent that had violated my nostrils when I entered the cave. Bodies. All torn apart, chunks of flesh and other bodily bits, torn police uniforms and severed limbs strewed around the walls like a macabre modern art piece. Piles of organs lied on the dirt floor, strewn around randomly like party decorations, and whatever remained on the dirt ground was barely visible, as it had since been covered by a river of blood, feces, and other fluids covering the area that I didn't even know was capable of being made. I looked down at myself, only to find my clothes soaked in that same redness that covered the floor. I shut my eyes at that point and turned off the light, and I got back up. I would have vomited at that point, but whatever would have came out, I had to choke it out as best as I could before walking back down the cave's pathway. This time around, I wind up leaning myself a bit on the wall of bodies on the side, attempting to use it as a way to not fall over again. It was vile and disgusting, but it did what it needed to do. I knew it. This was exactly the place I needed to be, and whatever was waiting for me at that main room in that cave made damn sure of it to make it obvious. It took me nearly half an hour to traverse the pathway that led to the main area of the cave, but I managed. Taking out my flashlight once more, I shined the area that surrounded me. Nothing. Nothing was there. There were no markings, no footsteps, nothing. The torches were there, but those were barely even anything. Nothing there to alert me to someone's presence. I took a few more steps and kept looking around the area, trying to find something. It was then that while moving the light of the flashlight that I had, for a brief second I illuminated something. I quickly reverted the light back to the location of the place where I had seen the thing. Standing there, right dead center in the room, was her. Mare fucking Goodway. She looked at me with a look of pure hatred and wrath, her face twitching rapidly and her eyes widened and darkened. Her clothes were filthy and soaked in a mix of blood and other bodily fluids, so much so that if you didn't know beforehand, you would have thought that her clothes would have looked red. "Officer Michael," Goodway announced, cocking her head to the side violently. "It's been some time, hasn't it? It's about time I finally see you again."
In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.